Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast, can at times contain adult language and themes. It is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Digital Dissection Podcast, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look at our favorite properties, creators, and topics. We are your humble hosts, Joe and Mark, two pop culture nerds dedicated to telling entertainment history before it's forgotten too soon. Join us on Facebook, Twitter, and our blog for more information on the show. We also love to hear from you. Write us at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get to dissecting. Hello, pop culture nerds, and welcome back to Digital Dissection. Today, we're happy to introduce you to one of our favorite artists across commercials, toys, and many popular video game series. He's voiced a Ninja Turtle, an arm-flailing boat salesman, and many know him as Kenny from Telltale Games, The Walking Dead. Welcome to the show, Gavin Hammon. How are we doing, Gavin?
Hello. Hi, thanks for having me. I'm swell. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing great over here.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing okay, despite the fact that my mustache is just horrible, and I'm sorry you have to see it.
No, I'm liking it. I'm digging it. It's a choice. There's nothing wrong with it. Who said that? Who told you that?
It is
It
a
is a choice.
three-piece stash. It's like a
It is a
suit for
three-piece.
your face, and you
Yeah.
should not back down from that. Own it.
So, like, the soul patch is kind of the vest, right?
Yeah.
This is the coat, and these
Yeah.
are the
Get the
pants.
pants right there.
Exactly. It is.
See,
It is.
Joe and I would
never.
just fill it all out.
Yep.
It's easier. Way,
Yeah.
This is low
Wow.
maintenance.
right?
This way. Yep. Mm-hmm.
What you're seeing here is what happens when your mom's Filipino and your dad is like just full on German. So I got the
Yes.
Fu Manchu, and then all the other armies kind of just retreated in this area.
Yeah.
So we are an
They're
audio and
occupying their territory. Occupying their territory.
strategic. Yeah, it was strategic that they left. They knew they couldn't grow there. but yes, Gavin, it's awesome to have you, man. How you doing?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's summer, so I'm a pretty avid gardener. So I'm pretty deep into the gardening season right now with my peppers and tomatoes coming in. So yeah, it's good. And most of the work these days, thanks to COVID, knock on wood, I guess, is from home, which is a silver lining for sure. So most of the stuff that we have to do, I don't have to go anywhere. I just go like over there.
Yeah,
So.
that is always a plus. I mean, you're now garden adjacent when you are working.
Yes.
So if you
Very,
can
very
quickly
close
go
to
and do something in the garden, not a problem.
I could even open those windows and see it from here, but I don't.
No.
Because then I'm gonna have some sun issues on a couple of these the whiter toys that I have in here.
Yeah,
We don't need that. Don't need that yellowing.
No yellowing.
Yeah. The funny thing is, so we used to be an audio only program, and now we do the audio and video, as we kind of talked about. And for those that just listen to the audio program, I feel like they're going to be at a disadvantage just not being able to see the impressive nerdery behind you.
Yeah, it's pretty nerdy. I mean, I'm audio only as well, so being on video is weird. But yeah, no, there's a lot going on. But it's when you're old and you collect things, you accumulate things, which I have done.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Since not all of our listeners can see the absolute nerdiness behind you, instead of giving them like a full-on tour, let's kind of dive into more of Gavin, but from a younger age, because you grew up in San Francisco, right?
I grew up in the Bay Area.
Okay.
I grew up in Contra Costa County, so about 30 minutes east of, 30 minutes as the crow flies east of San Francisco.
All right.
And I still live in the Bay Area, so I'm still, San Francisco adjacent.
Okay. Not bad. Not bad at all. And were you always kind of nerdy from birth, or did something kind of set you along that path?
Well, I mean, I'll be 49 pretty soon. So I was born in 1973. And so just in terms of how we, accumulate media, it was kind of like we would have access to things from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and, things that were current. So it was like, I've always had a pretty, robust consumption of media, and comics and, comic strips and cartoons, video games, movies. So yeah, I've always been kind of interested in the minutia of, of all that sort of, I guess, what we're calling geeky culture. I just think it's cool stuff. I didn't really get into sports until I got into sports probably about 20 years ago. So that was relatively later in life for me. But now I'm very much into baseball and basketball. And so
I have heard that you're a disgruntled A's fan.
This season, especially disgruntled. It's real hard to be an A's fan right now. Not just because the team is the worst in baseball. They currently are. I'm hoping that the Cincinnati can really pull it out for us. But no, it's just there was so much really awful bad public relations stuff with the front office and the fan base in the off season. It's real bad. Doubling our season ticket prices, taking away any sort of perks or incentives. Don't get me started. No. So it's a tough time. They don't want fans there, clearly.
No, so. I've heard they even stopped validating parking for season ticket holders. Is that a true thing?
Oh, no. Yeah, you can't get parking included anymore. You got to buy it. Used to get parking. We used to get parking. We used to get like a righteous discount. We'd get, I think it was 50% at one point off concessions, which included alcohol, which was nuts. But yeah, no discounts on anything anymore. Our seats went from being $45-ish to $70-ish, something like that. Yeah, just bad.
I was gonna say,
so when you see the news and you see people not, at A's games, it's there's a much deeper picture than just the team sucks. So, or the Coliseum sucks. I love the Coliseum. So
yeah, dude, I can't help but talk about this for a second. We're not a sports podcast by any means, but you can see that I'm a Yankees fan, and
I noticed that. I was just gonna ignore it.
Well, hey, I just want to go on record as saying that I consume the entire sport.
Why is it there's not a good team in Minnesota? How strange.
There's not. I mean, really, there isn't in Minnesota. There's not one in Wisconsin. I mean, it feels like this is just a dead zone for good markets,
Right.
But I was going to redirect you to the good times of the Oakland A's, which would have included the Giambi brothers, rest in peace, Jeremy. The big three, like Tim Hudson, Mark Mulder, and Barry Zito. Like I remember those days because that's when I did like peak baseball consumption was like during the early 2000s, and so I used to
great time. That was the streak. That was the 20 games, the 20 game win streak.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which is good. They made a movie about that, I think. We actually we went to the game. It was probably like 17, maybe it was like 15 or something, but it was the game where Huddy pitched against Zito. And it was this is garbage. They were both so old and terrible, but it was fun. Because we like the Giants. I got nothing against the Giants.
I remember that game because like Mark Mulder just happened to show up that day, and he was just in the stands, and they did the photo ops, and I'm like, man, I can't be this old already, but it's like that was the twilight of their careers, so it's like,
oh yeah, for sure.
It's like, holy crap, that went fast. Like that whole like 14 years just blew past us, and I couldn't believe it. But either way, the folks that don't listen to sports are probably going like, what are they reminiscing about? And what we're reminiscing about is some of the best goddamn baseball you will have seen in your life.
It was good. Yeah, team was good. It was a fun time to be any sort of a fan. I mean, they would sell the place out. At the Coliseum, they could fit. I mean, they really can fit like 60,000 people in there. It's huge. It's not one of these new baseball parks that hold 40 or something. And that place used to be crazy jumping. So
well, hey, like I said, I consume a lot of it. I'm not one of those Yankees guys that just kind of knows two people on my own team. Like I really do love the sport, but I tell you what, moving away from that for a second. Now we've actually had a chance
about the Yankees.
we can talk shit on the Yankees all day. Let's just.
I like Aaron Judge though. He's our guy.
Yeah, how can you not love that guy?
Yeah, he's not really Bay Area, but he's Bay Area adjacent, out from Lincoln,
yeah,
not too far from us, Stockton area.
there's a local boy, right? I mean,
That's right.
local-ish. So,
Local talent. Yeah.
well, hey, speaking of local, okay, here's something I wanted to ask you about because we've talked to a couple actors who have either been within the San Francisco area or maybe like, northern LA,
Mhm.
and a lot of early education. We're not just talking college here. Some of like the high school programs seem to be catered like really heavily towards the arts. So whether it's acting um, or just some of the art endeavors.
Hmm.
And what I was curious about, because we've asked about high schools before, and you were a Mustang at Monte Vista, correct? I'm trying to
Wow,
remember if I knew that.
look at you. Yes,
Yeah,
I am a Monte Vista Mustang.
yeah. There you go. Boom. We're technically a classic Chevy family here, but we'll go with the Mustangs. That's fine for now. But I didn't know if Monte Vista had any specific program or anything that maybe catered to your interest for performing arts, and I didn't really quite know if that was part of the curriculum there.
Sure. I took a lot of drama classes. I was in and was for a year or two the director of the improv group. We had an improv comedy troupe that we was just student run and student, managed until we left. And then I think one of the drama teachers took it over, which was kind of sad
Oh
because
no.
we were just such little, anarchists in our improv group. We had a great choir. We had a competition winning, fantastic choir. So I did a lot of singing, which is, was a lot of my vocal training was from that and from taking voice lessons. So yeah. And I mean, we had a TV productions class that was, I didn't take it, but it was pretty groundbreaking for high school, especially in the 80s and 90s when I was there.
Mhm.
Yeah, and actually the guy, Chester Farrow, who taught there was really heavily involved with the A's broadcast team too. So he would work at the Coliseum quite a bit, and helped set up their system and run the PA and that sort of thing. Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I can't speak to any other schools in other areas or anything like that. But I mean, I'm a product of, California public school system. And then I went to, all the way through college, I went to Cal, to UC Berkeley. So
Yeah.
public school too. But yeah, I feel like it was a pretty good education, and we had a lot more opportunities than my kids do these days. They don't have a choir. There's a drama group, but I'm not sure if it's a class. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it's how it compares to today, but I feel like it was pretty arts. At least you could get involved in it pretty easily through school.
Sure. I've always wondered that because, since some of the folks that listen to this program know that we're from Wisconsin, and really, if you want to get into something, it's probably related to cheese and or recovering from alcoholism. So
Yeah.
The
that's
Packers?
or the Packers, yes.
Yeah,
It's definitely Packers, dairy, or yeast. It's one of the three things. There's no
yeah.
other thing to do here.
Well, I
There's
mean,
no.
you got those three things. It could be worse.
It could be worse, but I've always been curious about that because of just the fact there's so many iconic, theater houses in the area,
Mm.
and you kind of wonder, is there a system of, in a sense, whether it's spoken or not, right? Like how does the talent kind of work its way through?
I don't know. There are definitely theaters in San Francisco, probably way more so in Los Angeles or New York. And I think it's just probably the urban, proximity as much as anything else. I think in urban centers like that, we're pretty close to Berkeley as well, and Oakland, so we've got three pretty decent sized, metropolitan cities. I mean, Berkeley's not really that metropolitan, but tons of theater. And I think it's just a product of wherever you're at. And if you're closer to a metropolitan area, it seems like there's more of that opportunity and focus just because it's closer to you, rather than like in a place where there is no theater scene or there is no, music scene. It's harder to get, wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
Here,
Oh, yeah.
it's super easy because it's everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, for us in the Midwest, it's you basically go to Chicago
Yep.
and you hit up Second
Yeah.
City,
Yep.
and then you try to work your way to the east or the west, and
Yep.
have a chance at it there. But Going back to what you mentioned about choir for a second, I was interested in how choir kind of led to, working with the Dance Hall Crashers, because I actually remember seeing artwork for your band in like the mid 90s when I was there in California.
Sure.
And it just stuck with me because of like red on yellow, and it just like popped at me, when I saw it. And
Yeah.
so I
It
was
was on
curious.
rip off of Charlie Brown, that Charlie Brown, Charlie Brown brand.
Hey, rip off
So
or not? Yeah. I mean, it's just
that
a cool thing.
had nothing to do with really anything aside from who my brother is. So my brother, Jason Hammond, was in Rabid Lassie and Breakaway, these kind of really early Bay Area straight edge punk rock bands. He was in Downfall, which was a post Operation Ivy band with Tim Armstrong and Matt Freeman and Dave, their drummer, Dave Mello, and him. And it was basically just Op Ivy without Jesse. And they played a lot of songs. And at the same time, Tim and Matt started this like a real more ska band with horns and whatnot. And my brother was guitar player and wrote a lot of the songs, especially once I joined the band. He became kind of one of the principal songwriters. And their drummer quit. And I had been taking drum lessons from a guy named Jeff Campitelli, who lives like 2 blocks away from me now in this lovely town that we both live in, which is pretty cool. But he was like the drummer for Joe Satriani on most of his records early on, and fantastic human being. But he was my drum teacher. I took lessons. So when their drummer quit, my brother was like, "Hey, my brother plays drums." That's what he sounds like. And
Okay.
so, yeah, I just came, and I think my audition for them was to play Spaghetti Western by Primus, which is this big, this big double bassy kind of ridiculous tom thing. And I played that for them, and they were like, "Yeah, okay, sure." So that was it. I just sort of, and I was in high school. So I was like 17 or something at the time. And yeah, we just started touring and playing. And so I was in high school playing shows, in some neighboring states and in Southern California, on the weekends. And then I went to college, and then about midway or so into college, 95 is when we signed with a subsidiary of a major label, and then eventually went to tour. So I dropped out, went back to school and finished in like 2000 or something. So yeah, so it was just my brother. That was all.
Well, on that
No
note,
choir.
it actually kind of brings us to our first fan question here. And what was it actually like having this experience with your brother being in a band? And do you have any memories or big takeaways being involved with the band that you'd like to share?
Oh man. So being in a band with your brother, I look back on it more fondly now than I probably did then. We got along pretty well, but it was we were pretty much together constantly, because it was like I was always rooming with him. So he was always driving, or I would drive sometimes, but he would do most of it, when we didn't have a bus or something like that. So it was just spending a lot of time with, it's like a family. And so when it is your family, and it's, it can be really trying, because, when you're touring and when you're in a band, it's like, you have really high highs and really low lows, just depending on where you are, what you're doing, how many times you've been stuck in Wisconsin that year. It just really does depend on, on the circumstances. But yeah, we get along well now. We're still, friends. It never really came to blows that I recall, but yeah. And oh geez, just in terms of like band stories. Okay, so probably one of the better ones that I have is we played in Japan with it was this big festival that like went on all night. It was like 8 bands and then 8 more bands, and it went like all night long.
Wow.
We played our set. The headliner was MC Hammer. So we were, and it's Japan. So it's kind of like you have a laminate that says all access and you can go and do anything you want. And they just sort of trust you. So we have a bunch of pictures where he's playing, and what was funny is it's like 30 people on stage, and it's like a DJ and Hammer and like 28 dancers, which was wild. But so we have these photos where we're like crouching down in front of him, in front of the stage, and there's thousands of people there, but we can just walk up in front of the stage and be basically like inches away from him. So we have a bunch of silly pictures like that. And of course we took a bunch of pictures with Hammer. And funny story, full circle, it was the opening night. This is going to be a little bit of a long one, but it should be fun. Opening night of the Oakland Athletics, maybe 2014, maybe 2015. And my wife and I are there. We have seats, our season ticket seats, which are basically center behind home plate, up above the diamond level. Good seats. So the whole time we're there, we see these two people that are sort of like arguing with each other, these couples. And all of a sudden, the two female members of these couples just start fighting, just like hair pulling, punching, kicking, dragging. It just goes on and on. Finally, like security gets in there, cops get in there, break it up, pull them apart. And they're taking one of them, like this one couple away. And then like the one girl, like just who is not being arrested, reaches back over the seat, grabs the woman by her hair, pulls her back over. And it's just like, they're going at it. Then one of the guys looks at the other, projectile vomits all over the other guy. It's just like, you can just hear everybody, oh, all falls apart. And then like crazy. My wife was like in the bathroom at the time. She comes back and she's like, what the hell happened? And I'm like, you are not going to believe it. So we're sitting there, maybe like, couple of bats later, MC Hammer just comes out of nowhere. I heard there was fighting. I came to break it up, because it's Hammer. He used to, he's there all the time. He was a bat boy there. And so I said like, hey, I took a picture with you in Japan like 20 years ago. And I show it to him and he's like, turn it around. We take another one. So, yeah.
Well, the pressing question I think we all have is when he is going through the seats, does he do the shimmy move to get past where he has to go up the side strut? Yeah.
No, he does not. He does not. He's very low key, and he's just like no fan gear at all. He's just wearing like a leather jacket, and he's just like, yep, everything's cool.
and a t-shirt that says I am not MC Hammer. No worries. Well, I'll tell you what we, as we kind of continue the Gavin story, like the made for TV A&E type of story we're going to tell here. What I wanted to understand was a little bit about this voice acting journey. Or I just like to call it acting because I honestly know there's
we appreciate that.
Yeah, I know there's nuances between it, but God damn it, some of the voice actors I've seen are some of the best physical actors I see in studios. And so based off of some of the interviews I've seen with you in the past, I've heard that the story that kind of started things off was actually a suggestion to try to become, a voiceover actor, right? And it was you're doing like manual labor one day, and your dad calls you, and it kind of snowballs from there, right? So clearly that wasn't the plan from the beginning, right? Like we kind of had to go through those motions.
I really thought that I was gonna be a musician or be a drummer, and that's what I was gonna do. I didn't love touring and traveling. It was not my jam. But I like playing a lot. And eventually, once we stopped touring, we kind of like, we were playing the same places over and over and over again, the same tours. It's like, it's really hard to make any money. So once we were kind of, taking a break on hiatus, my dad was an industrial contractor. So I would work for him. And I had always just done voices. Growing up, in the 70s, it's like I had access to things that were, for like the last 4 decades. And so it's kind of like I would always just mimic things, mimic movies, mimic cartoon characters, anything like that. And so eventually I was digging a ditch. We were doing an electrical installation at UC Berkeley. We were installing, I don't know what we were doing, but probably some machine and running power to it. And my dad called me and he's like, hey, there's some woman on the radio that has a voiceover school and you should listen to it. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. Because I mean, I just spoke in dialects, which was incredibly douchey. But, you know, it's like I would just do that. I would just be doing my weird, bad accents, you know, kind of all the time. It was just, you know. And I listened to it. It was a woman with a school in Sausalito, and I just took classes. And after about 5 years or so, I signed with an agent, and you know, and now I have people that want to talk to me about it for some reason.
I feel it's very meta right now as we kind of stare intently, you know, but hey, that's actually part of the journey we're interested in, though, is a little bit about that 5 years. Is what kind of building blocks did you get from that you know, maybe help you the most, you know, in entering the industry?
Frustration mostly, just because I felt like, okay, I totally get it. I feel like I can do this. I feel like, you know, I'm comfortable doing characters and stuff like that. I'm not super comfortable being myself for commercial stuff, but it was like, there's just like, especially in classes at the time, there just weren't any opportunities. So it's like, I'm taking these classes, I'm getting, you know, great, come on out, feedback, you know, from the teachers and whatnot. And I'm just kind of like, okay, so I need real feedback and I need like opportunities in order to do this. And so that was probably the hardest thing. And for anybody that's, you know, on this sort of journey, that's the real trick, is sticking that out and making sure that, you know, you're getting in front of people that can hire you and, you know, help make that happen. So yeah, that was probably the biggest thing for me, was just making it through that without, you know, quitting and moving on to something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did like representation have anything to do with that too? Because we've talked to folks that have had to, I wouldn't say like merry-go-round this, but you have to probably change it just because of the, you know, the trajectory of your career and what direction you want to go. Like, was that part of your journey too, like changing representation?
Not really. So I did get signed through that school. I got signed with my SF agent, Stars, and I signed with an LA agent at the time, also through another class. Like the one person would win the class, and what you would win is an opportunity to go and like read at that agency. Which was really, really cool. I did eventually leave that agency, not because of career trajectory or anything like that, but just because my agent that I knew the best there, she had come up as a booth director, my friend Becky Dodd, and eventually went into casting. She left this agency. She quit to go and be a casting director. And so I was kind of like, okay, well, I don't know that anybody really gives a crap about me there anymore. So I actually went to a different agency, which is Atlas in New York and Los Angeles, which I absolutely adore. But I don't do a lot of like, oh, I need to shake things up and I need to move to a different agency because this one isn't, you know, promoting me as much. Because I still feel like most of the onus of that stuff is on me. And it's like, if I'm not booking and I'm not getting, you know, if I'm not getting opportunities from them, it's probably not them not working me. It could be, but, you know, I usually try to internalize all that stuff and, you know, try to resolve what I'm doing potentially wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good character trait. I mean, I've read a lot of leadership books, being in, you know, sales and sales management, and honestly, looking inward is usually the first suggestion that comes up in those scenarios. Like,
Sure.
look at yourself before starting to look outward, and what can you impact versus what other people can impact, right? So I think that's just a really admirable trait to have and a good way to kind of go about life just in general. So
yeah, I mean, I know if you're based in LA, it's different. If you live in LA and you're based there, a lot of times people do leave and they go to other agencies to shake things up or to get a better deal, to get a different, you know, sort of probably a different commission percentage or something like that. I don't know. Depends on who they are and how important they are and what they've done, I've always been pretty small C celebrity in terms of my VO stuff. And I try to do everything that, that gets presented to me. So it's like I do a lot of weird stuff that in LA I probably wouldn't necessarily have to, or, be focused on. But, in the Bay Area, you kind of have to be able to do everything in order to have a career and work. It's in LA, you can just do games, you can just do animation, you can just do promos and stuff like that. But here, it's not quite as open. So I do a lot of different kinds of stuff that's, not sexy and super boring, but it's fun.
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting you bring up some weird things you've done, and your website actually says you've had a lot of projects that are too weird for classification. How weird are we talking here?
I've done a lot of stuff that's like non-speech, things that are just emotes, non-verbal emotes. There have been a bunch of those that tech companies have sort of built as kind of like to counter The Sims. I've done The Sims too, which is another like non-language thing. Yeah, lots of weird stuff, where it's just like you never really know what it's for or what the circumstances are. But yeah, I mean, I've probably forgotten way more jobs than I remember. But yeah, some strange things that you're never quite sure what anybody's going to do with it or why they want it. But they're paying you to be there and say it, so sure, why not? Good luck with it.
I was actually blown away by you and Dave Fenoy doing you guys a little clinic, a mini clinic on just the art of this made up speech. And it was on his podcast. It felt like you were having a real conversation, but in a language that no one could understand. And that was incredible.
I love Dave. And that was just improv, sort of like literally made up. Because I think he was asking me about maybe teaching. And I think at the time I was teaching a class that was like a gibberish class. Because I've done a lot of it. And I've worked in a lot of like both foreign language that I don't speak and made up languages that I don't speak. So I can get through the emoting part of it without necessarily needing to know what the words are.
Yeah.
Which is, it's just part of communication.
I feel like anybody with kids in the room would probably understand that, right? Because
I hope so. Yeah. Because I mean, you eventually got to communicate with them, and they're not very clear about anything. Although my kids always were. I was a stay-at-home dad for both my kids when they were really little, and I never did baby talk or anything like that to them. We would go to Target looking for toys, and I would just be having a conversation. We would just be talking and chit-chatting, and they'd just be like, whatever. I was never one to. I was very communicative. I knew what obnoxious meant when I was like 4. So I would always, and I was cursed by one of the moms in the co-op way back when, cursed me and said, "I hope someday you have a child exactly like you." And now I have 2. So
well.
Yeah. She didn't mean it in like a good way. So.
I know it's always meant to be ironic or just on the cusp of insulting, but really, who doesn't look at their kid behaving like them and go, "I am proud of that child"? Because
depends on the behavior. There's certain behaviors that I do that I do not want to see repeated.
Well, I do a lot of this, like I call it kitchen interpretive dance. It only happens in the kitchen, but then I just kind of do this like little climbing motion with my hands and stuff. And then I look back at my 4-year-old one day, and he's eating his food, and he's just sitting there, waving his hands like Napoleon Dynamite style. And I'm like, you clearly didn't learn that from daycare. And I feel like I can own that, right?
You learned it from watching you.
And I look at him and I go, "You're goddamn right, you did."
Yeah,
so
you did, buddy.
It's a good.
Betcha.
Well, I tell you what, for the folks that have been listening at home, they're probably wondering, you guys are talking a lot about like the early and the prep going into the career, which we honestly love. We love hearing about that stuff, but there's no way that we would avoid Telltale's The Walking Dead, because for me, this was like an event when it first came out. It just stopped me dead in my tracks. And it's crazy to think we've celebrated 10 years of it already. I mean,
so old.
No, I wouldn't say it's old. I would say it's it's the fact it's been relevant for that long, and that I every time I have a chance to sit down, I will pick a season and replay it. And you've even mentioned too that you wanted to be impactful, whether it's positive or negative, in the role of Kenny.
Sure.
And that's kind of how I see Telltale's The Walking Dead. Is that there are times when it may not be an entirely positive experience,
No,
but you're still having a really fun time,
I
doing
hope
that.
so. Although
Yeah.
I've gotten more people that tell me that it was the first video game that made them cry,
Oh.
which I was like, right on. You
Yeah.
damn right it did. Yeah, no, I mean, I still get people still reach out to me every day that say that, Kenny got him through something, or the game got him through something, or just how much it meant to them, or how they still play it, or they played it again, or they never sided with Kenny, or they always sided with him. And I mean, it was just a job. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like to do a job, and like it was really rad to book for them because they were doing Sam and Max, they did all kinds of other stuff that was like, and they were like one of the bigger deal at the time, Bay Area based publishers. We also had, we had EA, which was a pretty big deal, and 2K was there. But so this was like narrative stuff that was different and cool. And I mean, I was thrilled to just get the job. I mean, the fact that 10 years later, that it's like it impacts people, it like touches people in their daily lives. I mean, it's so far beyond like what we could ever have hoped for, from just like being in a game. You know what I mean? It is absolutely mind-boggling to me that, that something that I played some tiny little part in, has meant something to people, that they want to reach out to me and, tell me something nice. And it's like 99.9% it's positive. It's very rare that anyone says, anything negative to me about it. And that's fine. I mean, I don't mind the negativity either. It's just, I always wonder what the motivation is. But, I would never tell somebody I didn't like something they did, unless they were a politician. But aside from that, and that's too many beers on Twitter anyway. You know what I mean? So,
but see, that was something too that I've always wanted to ask you about. And once again, if I ever had the opportunity to buy you a beer, we'd probably talk quite a bit about this.
I like beer.
See, in Wisconsin, what you can't see is beer. So just so you know, on the webcam here,
but like beer.
Oh, it's just everywhere. Yeah, it's like sand. You get it in your house, you can't get it out.
What's the craft scene like out there, though? Because I don't know anything about craft beer out there, but I would assume it's good. It's phenomenal in California, so I would assume that in a place like Wisconsin, where it's really beer, I imagine it would probably be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a lot of these smaller towns that became like branches off of the bigger cities. So like old school Madison used to be like this big sprawling downtown, and then we kind of built like concentric rings around it, and now we've got these cities that are kind of on the offshoots. It's just like the Chicago hinterland, right? Like they built all these suburbs outside of it. So it's the same idea but smaller.
LA sprawl.
Yeah, and the thing is, like in all of these small towns, you have these specialized breweries that are experimenting with, fruits and like just it's like, hey, something fell in the vat the other day. Do you care if I pull that out? Like, no.
I'll leave it.
Yeah,
it's
called seasonal. That's called seasonal field mouse. We're gonna go with that. So it's really solid. There's a lot of good stuff you can try here, and if you don't like it, most likely you'll have something brand new next season. So it's really solid stuff. But as an acquired taste, though, point and click games were something I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned Sam and Max before, and I grew up with LucasArts, Sierra Online, and a lot of these point and click masters of the trade, right? We actually even talked to Al Lowe, who created, Leisure Suit Larry, and these series,
I remember that game. Wow.
Yeah, you spend time like problem solving with these characters, and like you have to discover narratives and stories, right? You don't just shoot things from A to B and then a cutscene, So I always wanted to ask you about that. Like, were point and click games like a big foundation of like gaming experiences for you? Like, what was that foundation like?
So I consider myself to be like a first generation gamer. We got Pong in 1977. We got a 2600. My dad was really into games. So we got a 2600 right when they came out, and we had a ColecoVision and Television, Vectrex, 5200, Genesis, pretty much all of the, with only a few exceptions. We didn't have like a Neo Geo or anything like that, but we had pretty much every system, all of the Nintendos from when they came out. So I was always very much, games were always a part of my life. I didn't love the point and click games because I liked the action of things.
Sure.
For me, like adventure, was one of my, very favorite games. Anytime first person stuff too, any like first person fantasy or sci-fi first person is still like my absolute sweet spot. I play Destiny 2 pretty much every day these days. I absolutely adore it. I know a lot of people don't, but so I've never been a big narrative guy. Sure. I grew up where video games didn't talk. So when they started to talk, to me, it was kind of a waste of time. It was like, skip. Which is ironic because I do make a pretty good living, in games. But yeah, no, I've never really been a big fan of point and click or, like the quick time event games or some stuff like that. It's like, sure. I've played a little Telltale. I played the first episode of A Wolf Among Us, which I really enjoyed. I never really played any of the subsequent episodes. And the only other times I've ever really played their games have been like under duress, when I've been like in studio for them, or I'm having to watch someone play it or something like that. Because I just, they're not my jam. Plus, I worked on them. I don't like playing games where I hear myself because it just takes me right out of the whole experience.
Yeah, I imagine that's got to be kind of a weird thing. It's kind of like listening to your own podcast for those of you that have podcasts.
Well, I think I'm the weirdo because I think most people actually really dig it. Most people think it's pretty cool and like to hear themselves in things. I just, I'm not a fan.
Well, I have to say this in the spirit of Kenny. I feel like Kenny would have a ColecoVision, and
probably,
like that would be him. Like he'd get back off of the fishing boat and come back to Duck and be like, "No, Duck, you're just getting the ColecoVision. I'm not buying anything else." And that's what you got to live with.
I think he'd probably just buy a Nintendo because I think ColecoVision was probably a little bit off the. I mean, unless he was a huge Donkey Kong fan, because that was the big selling point of the ColecoVision was it was like almost a direct port of Donkey Kong. I think that was the big deal. But he'd probably just have a Nintendo. And that'd be, you play Smash Brothers. It's good enough for you.
I got to say, I know that you mentioned, I appreciate you. I wouldn't say downplaying it, but like, it's probably hard to do it. Well, I was going to say, it's probably hard to like think what's the impact of this game going to be? Like, is it going to be a game of the year, winner? Like there's probably some of the nuts and bolts that you can appreciate going into it. But from the earliest days of like the Telltale Games experience, like past like the CSI days and like the Jurassic Park and all that stuff that they made adaptations for, this new age of this coming through with The Walking Dead, and then like you mentioned, The Wolf Among Us, those were transformative, So as you were working on this, and the team, like all the other talent involved, I mean, what was that environment like? I mean, did you kind of feel that air about these titles, or I mean, what was that like?
Certainly not at first. We didn't really know what to expect from The Walking Dead until after the first episode shipped, and it was like this huge success. And then I think everybody there, probably maybe not Vanneman and Jake Rodkin, maybe they didn't, maybe they knew what they had, because those guys are really, really savvy. But everybody else, I think, was just like, oh God, what do we do? Because we were working on Wolf at the time, but that all just came to a screeching halt. They're like, oh God, everybody's like looking at what we're doing now. And so Wolf totally changed. They recast a bunch of people. They recast Bigby from where we were before. And then a lot of it was rewritten and just changed. And I still got to play Dee and Dumb, who I was cast to be originally, and then they gave me Mirror, and then they gave me Beast too, neither of which I don't think I read. I think because there was some other sort of behind the scenes drama, and I think that the guys that were working on it were pissed at how it played out, so they gave me other parts. But yeah, I don't think anybody really knew what to expect, and so it was a big surprise because it was really different. Dave talks a lot about how different, you know, the audition was, because it really was just like a narrative. It was like an animated thing. You know, it didn't feel like a video game the way that they all kind of feel. So yeah, it was pretty wild to be in that environment, and I mean, working for them was always chaos, because it was like they never wrote the whole thing and then recorded the whole thing. It was always like they did that one episode, and maybe you would have like 4 or 5 sessions on it, or maybe it would get rewritten a bunch of times and you'd have 8 sessions on it. And then they would start working on the next one. And so it was like there might have been an outline, but it's like they were working. It took so long to come out because it was like we were working episode by episode by episode, which is a mind-boggling way to ship an episodic game. But you know, I mean, you could probably put 2 and 2 together and see sort of where it all kind of fell apart for them in terms of how and when the doors closed. Melissa was literally in a session recording when they called and said, money's gone, everybody, doors are closed, we're out. Yeah, and then God bless Skybound for coming back and, you know, finishing it off. But yeah, it was madness, and there were a lot of weird, you know, there were some of the really most excellent people I've ever worked with and ever met who worked there, and there were some really awful, unpleasant people that I would be cool with not seeing again. But yeah, it was such a weird mixed bag, especially for me. There were a lot of, like, you know, behind the scenes things that happened in other projects that, you know, I'm still pissed about, but you know, I can't be pissed about any of that stuff. So
it's okay. We won't make you go on record for any of that stuff.
I couldn't anyway. So that's one of those things where it's like, it wouldn't be something I could talk about.
So maybe you could talk about that, since things seem to have came to a rather abrupt and kind of quickly finished ending. Do you think Kenny would actually have any more of a story to tell after this whole thing was done? Or is he going to hang out playing Nintendo for the rest of his time?
I hope so, because I'd play that. No one would. There was a lot of talk after the first season, and then when the second season started, there was a lot of talk from some specific people there who really wanted to explore that. I believe that they had a couple of writers that, you know, kind of came in to sort of write up some treatments or something like that. But I don't think any of it ever happened or was ever executed on. No one told me anything. I just remember meeting one of those writers at Walker Stalker, which was the big Walking Dead convention that we used to do from time to time. And I remember him like picking my brain about, you know, well, how do you think you got out of that alley? That sort of thing. But I didn't really know what to make of any of that. Nobody told me anything because they wouldn't, and I wouldn't ask because I don't. But, you know, yeah, no, there was talk about it, but I doubt it would ever come to fruition. I didn't think it would come to fruition then. I certainly don't now. So.
Yeah, I mean, you can always use that opportunity to just make up anything you want for how you got out of the alley. I used to work at a restaurant that used to be like an older building before it was a restaurant, and people always asked me what it was before there, and I would just start lying to people and just make up anything. Like, oh, it was a mortuary. It was the craziest thing. You have no idea.
Where they killed all those kids back in '68.
I have to say, my favorite Kenny moment, Gavin, is fairly early on when you're getting to Makin, and he's seeing clearly the walkers are eating something, and he's like, hey, can you guys help us or something? Like, hey, what's going on? And then they all look up at him as they're eating, and there's blood all over him, and then Kenny's face is all shock. It's like, Kenny, did you actually look at what was happening? Because it reminded me of like Shaun of the Dead, where it's like, you know, they're talking to the zombies as if they're people yet. Sure. and I always laugh at that scene because it's just, I don't know, it wasn't meant to be comedic. I laugh at it every time because it's just great and I love it. but I feel like there's still a story to tell for him, and I would easily, play
Sure.
more Kenny stories because I always tried to keep him alive. I did everything I could to try and make sure that he made it through. I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Wow,
So,
bless you. I think people probably, people tell me they would, whether or not that's, a big enough audience or big enough market. I don't know. I would absolutely do it. I'd love to. I think it'd be super fun, but I don't have any expectations or anything like that.
yeah. Yeah. Well, clearly the whole process, I mean, you can, if you look at either social media or just how you interact with your fellow, actors on this project, clearly you guys have a really strong bond. I mean, it's fun as hell seeing you guys interact, like at San Diego Comic-Con when you did your live performance of
Yeah, that was
scenes
great.
from the game. I mean, what did you think about that experience? I mean, compared to like saying lines for cameo or just being asked to do specific lines in character, like how different a performance was that for you?
It was really, really neat. So that was Richard Igo's big sort of his big plan. So he was really excited to do that. He thought it'd be a great way to do something. We were on stage at Petco Park, which was pretty rad. So they set up a stage basically like on home plate, and then we performed it there. That was really, really cool. I know that, so while we were there, we went to like the Skybound party and like met the cast of the show, which was pretty rad. I went up to Andrew and said, I loved you in like, I loved you in Love Actually. And he's like, oh, chiz. But like, which is ironic because he's such like a stalker, awful creep in that movie. Yeah. But I just thought it was pretty fun. So it was a little bit, it was definitely a surreal. We met Kumail Nanjiani there too, which was a
cool.
Yeah, so it was just one of those trips where it's like you meet a bunch of people and it's crazy, and then like we do the live performance. I watched that back once and it felt really fast to me, the way I think we were probably all pretty nervous, and it just kind of we blew through the lines and did the whole thing. But it was really cool to be there. It was really cool to do it. It was a super fun trip. I remember Owen Thomas, who played Omid. He's one of my best friends, along with Sissy Jones, who's Katja, and Melissa, who's Clementine, or some three of my best friends. And I remember Owen drove down because he lived in LA. He drove down to San Diego and like crashed with me. So anytime that like Owen comes to like a convention or a show and crashes with me, it's always a good time, because he's just, he and I get along really, really well. He's a really great dude. We just sit around and watch YouTube videos and drink mezcal, which is pretty fun.
Nice.
But it was cool. Yeah, there was a lot of crazy parties because it's San Diego. It's wild. Those are always just kind of like something else. It was neat. It was a very, very cool experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. It had to have been fun. I mean, I have a lot of respect for the whole cast of not just The Walking Dead, but looking at The Wolf Among Us, because I don't understate it at all. Being able to deliver performances like that, it doesn't matter at what level or what storyline you might have in that game, they get driven home. I mean, I can't say that for any other series I've played.
We get such really fantastic scripts to work with, though, that it's all we have to do is get it off the page. It's like there were so many moments, especially in The Walking Dead, where it was just like scenes. I would be reading the scene for the first time in the session, because they would very rarely send them to me in advance, and it's just like, yeah, this is just perfect. The way that this plays out, the way that it's written, all I have to do is say it. You know what I mean? So it's like one of my acting coaches, one of his acting coaches used to say that good acting is good writing. As long as it's written well, it's like our job is, exponentially easier, because we're not turd polishing. All we have to do is really just kind of just say it, and it's just like it'll get off the page, and it's easy peasy. So that was a huge luxury pretty much in any of those Telltale projects. The writing was good, and it was very easy to just sort of play.
I mean, ultimately I want to say, as a response to a comment you made earlier about kind of being in that C actor area, like, or popularity wise, I don't agree with it, because
Small C celebrity.
you've had a massive impact across pop culture, whether or not you believe it, because when I look at some of the earliest
I
work you
don't
did,
believe it, but I appreciate you.
hey, like the Lord of the Rings Online, okay,
Oh
I
yeah, yeah.
I buried hundreds upon hundreds of hours into that game. And it's pretty clear because you can see how large I am and just how sedentary my life must be. But I mean, that game is so rich. There's so much that you can bury yourself in, and a lot of that is the level setting from interacting with those characters and getting
Yeah.
to really live through what was actually written for Lord of the Rings but put into a game form.
Yeah, no, Standing Stone is awesome. And it's like those sessions are so much fun because there are so many words, and weird dwarven words and, Mordor words. I don't know what the language they speak in Mordor, but yeah,
the dark language of Mordor. Yeah,
yes,
all that
yes.
good stuff.
It's pretty fun. Those sessions are cool. And that was a weird thing too, where it was just like, I just met the guy that voice directs all those is a dude named Randall Ryan, who, we just sort of met or became friends. And then like, he threw me some roles. And then, every, few months, 6 months, when they do a new expansion, we have a session for a little while. They're super fun. And I mean, that's another one that just something I could do from home, that was super cool. Not having to go into a studio, back when we used to have to do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Those are really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Like your expanse on pop culture has just been massive. Like I honestly really loved TMNT, Mutants in Manhattan.
Me too.
I've played that with my buddy Matt quite a bit.
I'm a huge I didn't play the game, but I'm a huge like Turtles fan. Like I grew up reading the Eastman and Laird comic.
Nice.
One of my all-time favorite issues is the Donatello like one shot that they did where he like shrinks himself really small. Love that. And Don was always my favorite turtle. I'm a huge Rob Paulson fan, so I was like incredibly honored to be cast, to like reprise that role. Nolan North worked on that game too, which was a trip to me. I didn't know that. I got to do a pretty rad dance sequence where I did a bunch of ADR to like turtle breakdancing or something, and I had to like dance grunts. Like one of my first experience with dance grunts. I've since had really extensive dance grunt experience. That was one of the first ones. So that was a fun project too. That was down in Santa Monica. I remember I really liked the engineer and the guy that does the casting and direction there. And you're in Santa Monica. It's like the studio was like half a block from the beach, so it's just like you can walk up and down the promenade, after the session. Super fun.
Nice. Yeah, there's actually I don't know if you kind of answered my next question on that, which was completely more of a nerdy basis. It was that you got to voice Donatello, but would you consider yourself a Donatello, or do you lean more towards one of the other turtles?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, if in terms of who I identify with personally, I'm probably more Michelangelo because I'm pretty, I'm pretty out there and I'm not super. I need my wife to, to help me be responsible and that sort of thing. Certainly not Leo. Just in terms of how I would relate to them, I would probably. I mean, I love, Donatello, but I don't think I have the discipline that he does. Maybe I do. I don't know.
I don't know. You seem like a party dude, so that totally makes sense to me. I love a good flow chart, so I'm a Donnie myself, but be a team forever.
We need to take a quiz. I'm sure there's a Facebook quiz that I can probably come up as Mike. I don't know.
Well, in a career that's full of iconic properties, because we talked about obviously TMNT, you've got G.I. Joe in there too. Tomb Raider.
Very close to my heart.
Yeah, you've got.
I love G.I. Joe. I grew up watching the cartoon. So getting to be Destro was weird to me because he was played by an African American actor, I think, in the cartoon. So that was strange that I was cast to do that. But I mean, I have probably 1,000 G.I. Joes. So I've been collecting Joes since they came out in 1981 or 2 or whatever. And it's still coming out. They have the 6-inch line now, and like those too much. But yeah, no, that was pretty. It's always fun to me to like get to do work on something that I love. You know,
Yeah.
I've gotten to work on a couple of different, Star Wars projects. Probably none of which I can mention, but like I did a little bit of like attraction work when they were like developing Star Tours, the revamp of Star Tours. I got to do a little bit of like scratch, for that. And then they invited me to the premiere when they actually launched the ride, which was incredibly rad. Yeah, it's fun to get to work on things that, are important to me, because I really am a pretty big geek. So, and I love games. I play games all the time, and so getting to work in games is pretty fun too. I get to go and see things that I like because of what my job is, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah. And that kind of leads us into actually one of the last questions we have for you before we give you the floor, because we wanted to know, and some of the fans wanted to know, are there any properties that you've wanted to work within or be involved with that you haven't yet, and that you have your sights set on? Like what's in your crosshairs for that?
I really always wanted to work for one of which actually came to pass. I can't say what it is, but another one, I played a ton of World of Warcraft, and so I always wanted to work on that, and I did. I think I'm some NPC someplace or something like that, which was pretty rad. Yeah, so no, it's more just like publishers that I would really like to work for. A lot of them I've gotten to do, which is pretty cool. There aren't a whole lot left. I've always wanted to do animation, and I've gotten to do a fair amount, over the last few years. Yeah, at this point, I kind of feel like I've gotten to do most of the things that I want to do. I don't get too worked up about, what I want to do and what I get to do. I'm just happy to be doing any of it, to be honest. I'm happy to be able to get up and be, working, this week, and be able to, put food on the table, doing something that I really enjoy and that I think I'm pretty good at. So it feels good.
Yeah, I would say that's got to be just a huge bonus in itself. Again, like not just having to work a 9 to 5 to get the bills paid, but actually doing something that you love doing and getting the bills paid.
Yeah, I mean, some days definitely feel like work, but even like work days don't feel, especially being able to do it from home, it really is so much better. I mean, I was working on a toy where it was like we were working like 20 or so hours a week, and it was about 75 miles away. So through the Bay Area, for me, it could take anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours to get there. And so I would be commuting, to do sessions like 9 to noon or 9 to 1. And there were some of those weeks too, where it's like, if I had anything else, any other bookings, I would have days where it's like, I'm leaving the house at 6 for this session at 9. And then after that, I drive through San Francisco and have maybe 1 or 2 other jobs. And then maybe I even have to go to Emeryville to do something for Leapfrog or Somatone or something like that. So there would be these weeks where I would have like 15 or 16 jobs, and I would get home at like 8 o'clock at night, and then I got to read all the things that are due the next day. It's kind of like, sure, you're making money and you're working, but it's just like, it starts to really just, it becomes quite a slog. So I don't miss days.
And I have to imagine also like just the physical strain on something like that on your voice as you do that.
I mean, as long as it's not too vocally stressful. Yeah. It's just the sitting in the car and the, not being able to eat as well as I'd like or exercise as much as I'd like. So that makes it hard.
Yeah. And we've heard that too, that sometimes it's not even so much about the actual voice acting itself. It's more about taking care of your body, and that, it'll kind of take care of itself in that way. So
I'm fortunate in that I've always been pretty resilient. So I used to, as a kid, I would lose my voice few times a month just from screaming and hooting and hollering and stuff like that. So these days I'm pretty resilient. When things come up, it doesn't knock me down too much.
Cool. Yeah, I was gonna knock on wood, but I'm pretty sure this is a laminate over here. But
I've got wood all around me. I'm knocking on this fancy snare drum.
Well, hey, tell you what, Gavin, dude, this has been great to kind of kind of peel things back a little bit and obviously get to see the nerdery behind you, but just just
try
to
to
get the
keep it secret. So,
well, hey, you've survived a digital dissection. We appreciate it, and we would love to kind of hear about what you've got going on and what you want to share with the folks listening.
Cool. There's a lot of stuff coming. There always, for voice actors, there always is. There's some pretty cool animation coming. There's some pretty cool games coming. I can never say what they are. If anybody wants to follow me or hear more of my ramblings, I'm Gavin Hammon in most things. Instagram's probably the best way. If you wanted to get in contact with me, you can always DM me. They're always open and I usually respond. I'm on Streamily. There's a bunch of prints. If you want to assign print, we do video broadcasts for that sort of thing. That would just be streamily.com/Gavin Hammond, my name. Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I don't say anything productive or important. Yeah, I'm just really, I'm honored that people want, to talk to me about stuff that I get to do. I feel incredibly fortunate to sort of be, where I'm at in life and, to be at this point and to be, make a good living and, do something I really enjoy and to get to communicate with excellent human beings like you guys. So it's pretty rad.
Thank you. Thank you for the compliment.
All right. I'm Gavin Hammond. I'm a voice actor. And until next time, keep on dissecting.